about Macha and her story, her most famous story that is, in my view, as far as I could place it, only a snippet, a small piece of what feels should be a much bigger tale surrounding this mysterious goddess. As I read it, the story of Macha and her curse, it seems more or less presented, at least as a background story to explain how the curse came about, and with the Ulstermen ending up unable to fight whenever threatened, and thus, in a way, setting the scene for Cuchulainn, if I say it correctly, to fight alone. And it's basically setting the scene for him to shine. At least how I view, when I take this particular story. However, the tale itself is quite short, but it's at the same time full of symbolism, and it raises for me a lot of questions, and I hope it will do for you the same. One of the things that, of course, immediately gets noticed is the role of horses, and it immediately brought me to the idea of, of course, the horse cults were very present all over Europe, Germanic and Celtic Europe. The goddess Epona was huge for centuries and centuries. She was called the Great Mare, and she does, it seems to have an echo with this goddess as well, with Macha. Horse stands, of course, for power, for nobility, for sovereignty of land and fertility. The horse in itself, you only need to look at it. I tried to give you a little background. Is a noble, kingly, elegant animal. Eating horse meat is and was and currently still is for a lot of people quite taboo. And meat that is taboo usually originates from the fact that you were not allowed to eat it unless it was part of a ritual, unless it was part of a sacrifice. And horse sacrifice after cow was the most sacrificed animal all over Europe, not just in the Irish island or British islands. It was also here in the continent, and so it was eaten, but only at these rituals, which are usually fertility rituals, and the blood was usually spread around the land before sowing. This is a widespread way of initiating and ritualizing the start of the season. But also the horse is also clearly a vehicle. The motive of horses allowing the rider to travel between worlds makes it one of the most important shamanic and psychopomp type of animal that allows the rider, in this case a shaman of some sort, to travel to the afterlife. The idea is that you sacrifice the horse, you kill the horse, and as its soul travels to the afterlife, you ride that soul and it takes you to that other dimension. So in this way, this new goddess, for me, Macha, has a lot in common with the Valkyrie, which I'm more familiar with. And their horses can fly, which could also be the explanation of why Macha ends up being so much faster than the king's horses in the race. The other connotation immediately is, of course, war. Her name, Macha, in classic Greek is Mache, is war, battle. And it raised, for me, the question, after reading the story for the first time, whether her name was always Macha or whether she named herself such after she was so cruelly disrespected and as she cursed the Ulstermen. I'm just asking questions. I don't have the answers. So it's just, I wonder. The twins, at the end of the story, she gives birth to twins. We are not told whether these twins were, in fact, horses or whether they were human or perhaps one of each. The twin theme in Indo-European cultures have huge meaning, could be a good meaning, bad meaning, but twins all over Europe. The horse twins in particular, their names Hengist and Horsa, very close to German and English as well. These mythological twin leaders of the Anglo-Saxon invasion of Britain. These were the descendants in another story of the god Wodan or Odin, and their names translate respectively as stallion and horse. Would these be the twins? I don't know. The curse, before I forget, because the curse is very special as well. Why did Macha curse the Ulstermen to have labor pains whenever they would be called to fight? It's not just any pain that she calls upon them, but labor pain. It seems to me very emasculating, very making them literally impotent. It's an interesting given, yet again. As a woman myself, what stuck with me was something in the retelling of this story by Karina Tynan. She says at some point in the story that Macha realizes, and I quote, "I forgot who I was when I begged for shelter under his bridled life." And that really rings with me. I'm going to say it again. Macha realizes that she forgot who I was when I begged for shelter under his bridled life. It definitely resonates with me, and I think with a lot of women. So, to be quick, it seems to me that this particular story is yet another story where the feminine, the sovereignty, and the progeny of life, in this case, Ireland, is sold out and disrespected, and a terrible curse follows. The story. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who lived in a lonely place in the hills of Ulster. He was a widower and a father of 4 children. Their mother had passed with the birth of the youngest, and he had not taken another wife since. The widower kept himself busy with his farm and the raising of horses, and the years passed by uneventfully. One day, a tall and dignified woman appeared. She walked into his hall with stately steps and sat down by the fire. She said nothing. She stayed there, poking the fire all day long. When evening came, she got up and walked into the kitchen and started instructing the servants. A nutritious meal was served in no time. The woman took the seat beside the widower where nobody had sat since his wife had died. When night came, she lay down beside him. This is how she became his wife, and they were very happy together for many years, and the farm grew more and more prosperous, and the horses they bred were famous for their beauty and speed. One day, there was a great fair in Ulster. The man decided he would go. He felt it was important to see and be seen, especially now that he was the master of such a prestigious farm. The woman tried to persuade him not to go, telling him that her presence should remain a secret. She warned him that if anyone should find out, their happy life together would be over. In the end, seeing she could not persuade him, she asked him to avoid drawing any attention to himself. And to be done with the discussion, he promised that he would be quiet and not mention his wife to anyone. To no avail. He went to the great fair and feasted and got drunk. As he continued drinking, he watched the king's magnificent horses in a race and forgot all about his promise. He shouted on the top of his lungs, "My wife can outrun any and all of the king's horses." Naturally, the king took this as a direct challenge of his honor and supremacy. He ordered his guard to seize this country bumpkin at once and bring him before the king. On pain of death. "Prove it," the king exclaimed. Messengers were sent to fetch the wife at the farm in the hills, and the man was chained and thrown into the dungeons. Amongst the green hills, they quickly found the beautiful wife, who was highly pregnant. At first, she refused to go, pointing out that she was about to give birth and in no state to race against the king's horses. However, it was made crystal clear to her that her husband would be executed for his drunken bragging unless she would prove him right and she would win the race. Pregnant as she was brought before the king and his entire entourage. They all stared at her and sniggered. She pleaded for time to allow her to give birth so that she would race the horses afterwards. But all her pleas fell on deaf ears. The king commanded to know her name, and she said, "My name is Macha, and my name and the twins I carry will stick to this place forever. Shame upon you all. Shame for showing no respect or pity for me in this state. You will pay for your senseless cruelty." The king's horses were brought out, and Macha raced against them. Her legs barely touched the ground as she ran, and she easily outstripped them. At the finish, she fell to the ground and gave birth to her twins. As she shouted in her labor pains, the strength of all the men who heard her ebbed out of them. They became like Macha, lying on the ground, helpless and weak with labor pains. And she hissed, "From this day on, you will be afflicted by this weakness because of your treatment of me. At the hour of your greatest need, when you are under attack, every Ulster man will become utterly helpless and defenseless. With this, I curse you and your descendants for 9 generations." And before anyone could move, she disappeared into thin air. The end.
Great story.